Vrinda, Jayadvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So last week we covered Mahaprakash Leela, followed by Advaita Acharya, a pastime of touching the feet of Lord Chaitanya when Lord Chaitanya jumped in water. So we'll now continue. Another pastime Lord performed was to liberate Jagai and Madai. We all know the story of how Lord Nityananda came to the rescue of Jagai and Madai after having beaten by them actually. It also shows extraordinary mercy of Lord Chaitanya. So in fact, Yamaraj, who makes an account of all the sinful activities, was actually writing down, and there are multiple people who are actually making an account of Jagai and Madai. And when Yamaraj heard about the pastime of Lord Chaitanya delivering Jagai and Madai, he got a shock, complete shock. In fact, he faints in Yamaloka. When Yamaraj faints, the Yama Bhattas, who servants of Yamaraj, they actually were pouring water to wake him up. At the time, Lord Shiva reaches out there, and they all ask Lord Shiva what has happened to Yamaraj. Yamaraj is a great devotee of Lord. He is one of the Mahajanas. And Lord Shiva, knowing the heart of Yamaraj, that he is a great devotee, he explains how actually Yamaraj fainted by hearing about the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. So far, there is no incarnation who has given love of God to a person who is so sinful. Lord has, when even in the incarnation of Krishna, he has delivered, but like Shishupal and others, he liberated them, but he hasn't given love to them. But Lord Chaitanya made them into pure devotees right off, and both Jagai and Madai, for the rest of their life, were actually lived like a pure Vaishnavas. That was the transformation to which Yamaraj was shocked. And that's the greatest mercy of Lord Chaitanya. And then the pastime of Chand Kazi. Chand Kazi was the ruler of the country at the time, where this land of Navadvip was. At one point, because of Sankirtan movement was spreading far and wide, devotees were chanting in the streets, and some of the Brahmanas who were very orthodox Brahmanas from the city of Navadvip, they all complained to Chand Kazi, the ruler of the country, saying that Lord Chaitanya is now chanting this holy name, which is very sacred and which should not be chanted outside. And he's chanting on the roads and making everybody, irrespective of their caste and creed, chant these names, which is a big offense, and it is against Vedas to chant like that. So when Hindus themselves complained to Chand Kazi was shocked that this is against Hindu rules. Even though he was a good person, he thought he should take an action, and he makes an order that nobody should further going forward. Nobody should make any effort to do Sankirtan in the streets of Nadia. This hurt all the devotees like Panchatattva, Advaita Acharya. Everybody was morose that they would not be allowed to chant anymore in the streets. And when this news reached Lord Chaitanya, Lord Chaitanya was mad at this proposition by Chand Kazi. So he said, why should we be stopped from chanting? This is the Yuga Dharma, and we are all rightful to chant. And he would say, do not worry, nothing will happen. Let's all go to Chand Kazi's place. And people all across the country started moving along with Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya would lead the entire force ahead with um, with a fire in the hand. They all move like this. You see here at the bottom here. So they all carry these fire torches, and in thousands and thousands of people march towards Chandkazi's palace. And looking at this crowd, Chandkazi got a shock of life. He thought this is going to be very tough situation now. So he himself conceded that he cannot face this situation. So as soon as he saw Lord Chaitanya, he connected he talked about his relationship with the grandfather of Lord Chaitanya, and how Lord Chaitanya happens to be nephew of Chandkazi. He talked about the relation that he has with Lord Chaitanya. And then Lord Chaitanya would say, if I am related to you, why do you make me stand outside? Let's go inside and talk. And Lord Chaitanya was invited inside Chandkazi's place. They had a lot of philosophical discussions. At one point, Lord Chaitanya tells them, why do you eat cow and bull? They are like mother and father. You should not you should not be eating your mother and father. So in this way, the discussions go at a length. And Lord Chaitanya explained about the chanting and Yuga Dharma, and how the chanting in the other order will not cause any offenses to the names that is being chanted. This way, the discussion will go on for a long time, and after that, Chand Kazi was completely transformed. In fact, he reveals a story that the night, before this, Chand Kazi actually goes to Srivas Pandit's place. That's the origin of Sankirtan movement. He goes to that place himself, and he actually breaks the mridanga. Even that mridanga is saved right now. Also, we can go see that mridanga. It's called Kola Bhanga. Means Kola means broken, Bhanga means mridanga. So that was the incident that happened that enraged all the devotees, and they all marched towards Chand Kazi's place. And this discussion happened, and Chand Kazi was convinced that there is nothing wrong with Sankirtan movement. In fact, he became himself part of the Sankirtan movement afterwards, and he himself chanted. That's why even now devotees consider Chand Kazi to be a devotee, and devotees visit his samadhi, Chand Kazi samadhi, where he was laid to rest after he passed away. And so at the place where Chand Kazi was buried, because in Muslim community they bury the body, there came two trees. One is a neem tree, the other was a champaka tree. The neem tree represents Lord Chaitanya. Champaka was the nickname of Chand Kazi when he was a child. So they both were together even after. Even now we can see those trees. So Chand Kazi, as part of this discussion, he reveals his dream in which Lord Narsingadev comes actually. So Narsingadev would come in the dream of Chand Kazi, and he would say, why are you stopping the Sankirtan movement? This is the prime method of purification for this age. So in this way, he comes and he actually leaves a mark on the heart of Chand Kazi. He actually with his nails, he makes a mark on the heart of Chand Kazi. So he shows that to Lord Chaitanya. So in this way, there was a nice exchange, and finally Chand Kazi was completely transformed. He becomes part of Sankirtan movement afterwards. He would also chant with other devotees. So this was this is the first civil disobedience movement, Prabhupada says. Not the one during our freedom movement in India. This is considered the first civil disobedience movement 500 years ago. There are more pastimes. So Vasudev Dutt is one of a very confidential devotee of Lord Chaitanya. He was so pure and so compassionate. He wanted to take the sins of all the jivas in the material world and continue to suffer in the material world and continue to exist, bearing all the sinful reactions of all the living entities. And he wants Lord to liberate everybody and take them back to Godhead. So that was the compassionate mood of Lord of Vasudev Dutt. So when Lord Chaitanya heard this, he was totally moved by the mood of this devotee. He told him, "You don't need to stay back, but because you desired this, I will make sure it happens." And at the time, whoever have lived, it is considered that they all got liberated. They all went back to Krishna. So those who have lived at that time in the entire world, actually. So that is the compassion of Vasudev Dutt. And another pastime was when Nimai was still youth and he's teaching his students. There comes one great Pandit called Keshav Kashmiri. He is well renowned in the entire world to be the most prominent scholar in all the literature, Nyaya and Sanskrit, grammar and Nyaya and logic. He is the foremost authority at the time. So he would go around all the chief learning places in India. So the chief learning place across the country was actually Navadvip at the time. So he comes there as well to to battle with anybody who is ready to argue with him in supremacy in logic. So so he comes and he hears about Nimai Pandit. He wanted to debate him. So so the debate was arranged, and the day before that, he happens to be near go to Ganges, and Lord Chaitanya was also with his students near the Ganges at the time. So and Keshu Kashmiri was with his students, and he happened to see him. So when Lord Chaitanya saw him, he actually made a conversation with him, and Keshu Kashmiri, Lord Chaitanya immediately asks him, "Yeah, tomorrow we are meeting anyway, but for now let's start some conversation." He asks him to compose verses glorifying Mother Ganges, which is nearby at the time. They are in the banks of at the banks of River Ganges. So Keshu Kashmiri, being the Sanskrit scholar, immediately just spurts out 100 verses in split second. He composes, and with very deep esoteric meanings. He would just So that's the scholarliness of this Pandit. Lord Chaitanya hears all of that, and he starts giving his giving his idea behind all of these verses. Lord Chaitanya, after Keshu Kashmiri stops speaking, Lord Chaitanya would initially appreciate the uh, the composition of Keshu Kashmiri. After a while, he starts pointing out various logical errors in the composition of Keshu Kashmiri, which baffles Keshu Kashmiri. Because first thing is, whenever he speaks, nobody can even recollect anything. Now this uh, Lord Chaitanya not only remembered, he also pointed in each verse what are the mistakes. This is completely mind-blowing to Lord Keshu Kashmiri. And this has never happened to him, not anywhere close to what has been experienced by Keshu Kashmiri at this time. So utterly confused, his mind completely blanks out. Lord Chaitanya tells him, "Don't worry, still you have time till tomorrow. Go back and refer to your books and come prepared tomorrow." And Keshav Kashmiri goes home. He was completely shocked and he wouldn't eat. He goes to sleep. At the time, he would beg Mother Saraswati, from whom he had a boon that nobody in this world can ever defeat him. He would beg Mother Saraswati, why it has happened to me? And Mother Saraswati would tell him, yeah, nobody can defeat you. I know that I have given you that boon, but the person you met is also my master. So I cannot empower you more than my master. And when Keshav Kashmiri hears this, he 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 completely changed. He becomes like a surrendered soul to Lord Chaitanya. But he would never reveal the position of Lord Chaitanya because of the confidentiality at the time. Next day, he comes with clear mind and completely surrenders to Lord Chaitanya. So this was a great transformation of this great Pandit called Kashu Kashmiri. So another thing was, there is a lot to discuss about Gadadhar Pandit, but I'm just picking one pastime out of 50 pastimes, possibly. Because Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, every instant was a nectar. Gadadhar was a close associate of Lord Chaitanya from a very young age. He was a very detached Brahmana, very completely detached from the world. And but he has a deep attachment to Lord Chaitanya from his childhood. He was waiting for him to transform into a devotee. But finally, he transforms. After that, Gadadhar Pandit would read Bhagavatam to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because who is the best person who can understand Bhagavatam other than Radharani, right? So Gadadhar Pandit was actually Srimati Radharani. His expositions were beyond, there is nobody. It is mentioned that not even Sukadev, not even Vyasadev, not even Krishna himself understands the meaning of Bhagavatam, especially Ras Panchadhyaya, as much as Gadadhar Pandit. So he would give his explanations, which are deeply filled with love for Krishna. In fact, Ras Panchadhyaya, if you look at those verses, it says Gopi Uchuhu, means the Gopya Uchuhu, means all the gopis were speaking these words. Like that, Sukadev Goswami writes. But actually, each of those verses were specific to the mood of a specific gopi. And that, who knows better than Radharani herself? So when Gadadhar would actually speak about these verses, Lord Chaitanya would go into complete ecstasy. So nobody can give the understanding of the mood of Radharani than Gadadhar Pandit himself. Now, Lord Chaitanya would relish the mood of Radharani by hearing from Gadadhar Pandit every day. Gadadhar was so attached to Lord Chaitanya. At one point, Lord Chaitanya was moving to various places. Gadadhar wanted to accompany Lord Chaitanya, but Lord Chaitanya would ask him to stay back and preach in Katwa. He would just completely goes unconscious and falls down, and Lord Chaitanya wouldn't even look back and moves on. And then finally he gives few instructions to Gadadhar Pandit, if I remember correctly. One is to teach Bhagavatam. Second is to worship Gopinath, Tota Gopinath. So Gadadhar Pandit would dedicate his life to worshipping Gopinath all his life, for the rest of his life, taking Kshetra Sannyas. He's a sannyasi, and he takes Kshetra Sannyas, staying in Sri Kshetra, worshipping Tota Gopinath all his life. And Gadadhar Pandit would, at the age of 48, Lord Chaitanya finally decides to, when he decides to go back, leaving the world, he actually merges into the deity of Tota Gopinath that was worshipped by Gadadhar Pandit all his life. And Gadadhar, after Lord has left the world, he couldn't sustain his life. Every day weeping and crying for in separation from Lord. Very soon he also leaves the world and goes back to God. In another youth pastime of Lord Chaitanya, showing his nature, was the book called Didit. So there was this great logician, Raghunath, who at the time wrote a book called Diditi, which is the most famous version, most famous book on logic at the time. And his desire, the Raghunath's desire, is to become the most famous person in logic in the entire world. And he is capable also. He is extremely, both Raghunath and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu both learned from Sarvabhauma. But in the beginning, Raghunath was the foremost student of logic, and he know even Sarvabhauma blessed him to write this book, and he knows very well that he's going to be very famous. And Gauranga was very young at the time. Gauranga actually decides to write book on Nyaya also. So he would compose the book, and Raghunath was very much aware of Gauranga's, intelligence and prodigy. So he was worried that maybe that book would be better than my book. So at one point, when they were all going on a boat, at the time Raghunath asked Gauranga if he can actually uh, read from the book. He thought, Gauranga would not read because his book is not yet complete, and he may not want to share because he's the current authority and he might feel competition from him. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has no competitive attitude. As soon as he asked, he immediately opened the book and started giving the expositions on logic. As soon as Raghunath heard, he was very clear that this is far more outstanding book than what he has composed. Then he started weeping like bitterly. And Gauranga would ask him, "What has made you cry?" Then he reveals openly the truth that if your book comes to the forefront, my book nobody would read because my book is no comparison to your book, and I will not become the most famous person in the world on logic. Lord Gauranga immediately cried, "Oh, you're crying for that. Don't make me sad. If only my writing this book causes your heart pain, I'm going to immediately throw this in water." And he immediately throws that work in the waters. In this way, the world lost the most expositions on logic, which is from Lord Chaitanya. He didn't think for a second before throwing it into the water. So that was the magnanimity of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So one time, after he transformed into a devotee after coming from Gaya, he goes to the washerman, where the washerman was washing his clothes, and he says to washerman, "Chant Haribol." Washerman thinks, "Hey, this seems to be a person sannyasi. He wants to beg some alms." He says, "No, I can't chant." So the washerman says, "No, I don't want to chant. I'm busy. I don't have time to chant." He continues to wash the clothes. What do you call? Beat the dresses, right? To before they dry. And Lord Chaitanya finally realizes this person is not taking. So he himself, "Okay, don't worry. I will wash the clothes for you. You chant the name." And he takes the cloths from the washerman and he beats on behalf of the washerman. And washerman thinks maybe this person is nice. And he chants Haribol. He says Haribol once. He says Haribol twice. And he can't stop saying Haribol, 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 Haribol. And he continues to chant Haribol so loudly. In he, he lost complete consciousness. His eyes turned up and he was just chanting in full ecstasy. His wife comes there and she thought something happened to him, and he calls somebody else nearby, and they all come they're all scared. Maybe they thought there is some ghost that is haunting this person. And finally, one person dared and tried to, stop this person, washerman. That person got a same ecstasy. He chants Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Now, two people are doing the same thing, chanting Hari Bol with their hands raised and completely immersed in total love of Krishna. And another person touches, another person touches. In this way, the entire, the community comes and everybody would, ecstatically chant the holy name. And Lord Chaitanya would watch this for some time and leaves the place. It was a very nice instant. So in this way, one more pastime, one final pastime. What is the time? 2:25. Okay. So one time, Lord Chaitanya, this is after taking sannyas in Sri Kshetra Jagannath Puri. Jagannath cart, Lord Chaitanya would dance in ecstasy before the cart. Every time, so the cart would start, and it would be, it will be moving on the streets of, from the Puri temple. It would start, and people will be pulling the cart. So Lord Chaitanya would form multiple groups where all the devotees would chant the holy name loudly. Lord Chaitanya would be simultaneously present in 7 Sankirtan groups, and he would plan very meticulously in each group who would be the, holding mridanga, who would be doing kartal, who would be singing. So in this way, a grand plan used to happen every time it happened. And one time, the cart completely stopped. The people tried very hard, and it wouldn't move even an inch. Finally, they brought elephants. Even then, nothing would move. After watching for some hours, Lord Chaitanya immediately goes back after stopping the kirtan for some time. He goes back to the cart and he touches the cart with his feet. With his forehead, like this, and the cart would move. So in this way, Lord Chaitanya showed until the pure devotee's touch is there, it wouldn't move. So in this way, a lot of miracles were part of everyday events during Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. There are so many more pastimes, but we just focused on a few and we didn't even go in detail. It is mentioned Lord Chaitanya's pastimes are like Amrita Sindhu. It's an ocean of nectar. And each drop of that ocean can drown all the 3 worlds. So that is the potency of Chaitanya Leela. Chaitanya Leelera Amrita Sindhu. The entire Chaitanya Leela is like Amrita Sindhu, and each drop of it can drown all the 3 worlds. So whoever comes across this great literature, Vrindavan Das Thakur says, whoever hears this pastime, their determination for bhakti becomes very strong, and they all are going to attain Krishna Prema, relieved from material miseries, never ever be bitten by the snake of materialism in this life. So in this way, we're all very, very fortunate to be part of this movement and study and hear about these pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, understand what is Krishna Prema, even though we are not there yet. So, but we are all very, very fortunate to come across these, the Chaitanya Leela and the nectar of this incarnation. So we'll stop here. Any questions? Because I don't want us to miss the next important session. So we have only 15 minutes. So if you have any questions, or we can stop here and stop recording.